All right, guys, welcome to a very special episode of Rolling with T-Bone. Uh, to set up the context of this episode, I'm going to be recording a phone interview with a University of Georgia student, talking about some of the things that are segueing into this October's uh, Rolling with T-Bone presents Cryptids of North America. So I am going to try to record this. There she is calling. So y'all guys just hang tight and let's see how this goes. All right, guys, I am getting ready to do my phone interview with Gracie. Gracie, tell everybody at home a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, you can call me Grace, Gray, whatever you like. I am a senior at Georgia State studying sociology. I'm currently taking a course about non-empirical creatures, myths, and legends. Basically, that just means any creature that has been purported or cited or experienced that has not been backed up by scientific hard evidence, but that has importance to different cultures or different regions.
Okay. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
So that's kind of, I am looking to interview you for my class about non-empirical beings.
Okay. Well, like I told you before the first time you contacted me about this, I'm very excited to do this interview. Very excited for your project. This is one of those things that I have noticed in the last, I would say over the last couple of decades and a half, last 25 years, we have seen a lot of the conversation about cryptids in general change. Whether it be, any kind of phenomenon really, we have seen the conversation change. And I think a lot of that has to do with our technology today. The technology has taken the conversation from, having to lean on what people told us into seeing what people have told us and being able to witness it. So I'm excited for this.
Yes, I am too. I actually, not 20 minutes ago, just went to the Bigfoot Museum in Blue Ridge.
Okay.
We got done with it about 20 minutes ago, looking at the Bigfoot Museum, and it was really fun.
Oh yeah. Well, the big guy has been reported. I mean, this goes back to the early pioneer days in our country. Of course, everybody kind of thinks about the modern interpretation of Bigfoot being the Patterson gimbal footage from, back in the early 60s. But the pioneers, especially in not just the western side of the country, but in this side of the country, the pioneers and the Native Americans have been reporting, the big guy, Bigfoot, Sasquatch, as the Native Americans call him. Sasquatch has been reported for years. I mean, this isn't a 20th century phenomenon. It's something that's been going on for as long as they've been telling stories in this country. So.
Oh, for sure. I saw an exhibit there talking about how some of the Native American tribes would have ceremonial masks made of what would be like a Sasquatch. They had two different types as well, which I found to be very interesting.
Right. We all kind of grew up with that here in these mountains. We all kind of grew up with these stories. The boogers and the monsters that lived in the woods. I mean, everybody in the Appalachian Mountains have been told all those stories basically since they were old enough to understand what was being told to them.
Yeah, of course. Were there any particular stories you were told that you would like to share with me?
As far as the stories go, I think you can cover a gambit of things with the stories, because it seems like every region of our country has a story, whether it be Dogman, whether it be Sasquatch, whether it be, UFOs. I think everybody grew up hearing those stories, and a lot of the stories that I grew up hearing, the area that I live in is, you know, and there's no way to lighten it. Back in the the late 19th century and the earliest 20th century, from the 1800s forward, our area was controlled by moonshine. Uh, Prohibition came along in the early 1900s, and everybody realized that moonshine was a moneymaker. So as we started hearing the stories, as we started getting older, we started wondering, okay, well, is this just something that they made up, and then over time it kind of took on its own legend? Was the story made up, and now it's kind of has sprung into its own kind of thing? But
how word of mouth can be flawed to change stories over time.
Yeah, exactly. If you hear like it just did, you'll know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, no worries.
But my first story, and this, of course, I'm going to give you the first-hand account. These are my own personal things that happened to me. So they're first-hand accounts. Did I lose you, Grace?
No, you're here. I am very excited to hear about your first-hand accounts.
Well, and I think those are really the only ones that I'm actually qualified to talk about. Which kind of goes back to what I was saying about kept passing down the stories that have been passed down for years and years. Over time, those things get told from one person to another. They get distorted. Facts gets changed, and then all of a sudden a anthill has turned into a mountain. So the first story, the first happening, and then they're not stories, they're just me relaying what happened. The first time anything ever happened to me of any significance, we're going back to probably 1988, 1989. And to kind of preface this and set it up, my mother passed away in 1988. So we had went through a couple of years where, in the mountains in the summertime, you just walked away from your home. You didn't really worry about locking your doors up during the daytime. If you had to run to town, you just left. There was several times that we had came back from running down the road trips, running to the store trips, where things had been rifled through, drawers had been gone through. Nothing was ever stolen, nothing was ever taken that I recall, but you could definitely tell that something had been there messing with everything in the house. Things were just kind of moved around.
Yeah, things are just kind of not where they were when you left them.
Yeah, and there was a couple of times we came home and there was just these awful smells, just god-awful odors. And as I got older, I started to understand that as we were turning in the driveway, because from the back of my house, you can't see the back door that leads into the back of the house. So as we were turning in the driveway, this thing was probably going out the back door.
Okay.
So the first time that I ever physically, it was a smell. I don't know if you've studied the difference between a polecat and a skunk. A lot of people think they're the same kind of smell, but they're not. This wasn't just a odorous like a skunk odor. It was more toward like a wet chicken, like a wet animal, like that was just dripping wet, stinking wet. In fact, it was bad enough where if it was a fresh smell that you were walking into, it would stench your clothes. That's how odorous it was. So we had came home probably about 6:30 in the evening. We had ran to town, came back, and I saw something standing at the edge of the woods, which is probably a good football field length away from the back of our house to where I saw it. And it wasn't looking at me. It was actually moving through the woods. And it was black. So, the fur was black. So immediately I just thought, okay, well, there's a bear back there. Because we do have bears in our area. And I do have one female bear that likes to come into our backyard a lot. So it wasn't out of the realm of possibility of seeing a bear in the yard.
Yeah.
So my dad was the one who pointed out why things, he was kind of asking, why is this here? Why is this moved there? Why is this moved here? What is that smell? And my dad was one of these guys who I never thought was really scared of anything, but my dad was scared of the dark. And it stems back to things that had happened to him in his childhood that he never really talked to me about before he passed away, unfortunately. There was one cemetery here that my dad would not go past it at nighttime. Very superstitious about things, very superstitious. So I think he thought if he talked about it, he was opening the door for it, if that makes sense. So it was in hushed tones and whispers that he would mention. But this evening, he kind of started getting curious about what was going on. He wanted to know what was happening. In the meantime, we had hunting dogs. My dad was a coon hunter, and we had hunting dogs that were tied up in a hunting lot, basically. They were on chains to keep them from wandering off. And we had one dog that just kept repeatedly being unchained. She would just be unchained, and she would be standing at the back door of the house all through the night. My dad thought that she was somehow twisting up the chain and unsnapping the hook herself. Well, after, this happening for several days, he kept saying, I don't know how she's doing it. The night that I had my first sighting of this thing, the very first time I saw it, she had not only slipped the hook, she had completely pulled the collar over her head. She was so terrified that she completely pulled the collar over her head. She skint her neck, skint her ear. She was scared. So this was probably 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. And, of course, my dad had friends over, and we were just all kind of sitting around talking. They were listening to music. And she came running into the house. The back door of the house was standing wide open, and she ran in so hard that she actually crashed into the kitchen cabinet. So in a few minutes, my dad told me, he said, take her back up, which it was my job to do. I took her back, chained her up. Now, I reached down, I took the collar off of the chain, put the collar back around her neck, and as I was getting ready to re-snap the chain, I just saw a shadow standing in front of me. And it's dark. There's no moonlight. This is 10:30 at night. There's no outdoor lighting whatsoever. And I looked up in time to see a 7 to 8 foot tall something stand straight up in front of me. There was no noise. It didn't, nothing was said. There was no grunting. There was no growling. This thing just stood up in front of me. It was kind of crouched down in the shadows of the trees. And I was no more than 3 or 4 foot away from it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I outran the dog back to the house. I ran into the house, told my dad what I had saw, and my dad had a friend here at the time. His name was Doug, and Doug stood about 6'3". And I told my dad, I said, this thing would make Doug look like a midget. But this is to a 13-year-old kid. My dad, for whatever reason, didn't send me back out. And, of course, they went out on the back porch with flashlights, shining around. Of course, you didn't see nothing. But he wasn't a big fan of me going back out at night, in the nighttime after that. Of course, he never would go out in the dark. But that was my very first encounter with, and I shrink to call this Sasquatch. Uh, I've never really labeled it as to what I thought it was.
All right.
Is this what it could have been? Absolutely. Could it have been a bear? When a bear stands up, a bear has a very specific form. And the only, there's no shoulder broadness like a human has. There's no swaying to the sides of the arms like a human's arms does. And this thing stood up, and it had the shoulders of a man, the arms swung to the side like a man, but it was bigger than any man I had ever seen. And it was just black. There was no color to it whatsoever.
Yeah, that sounds pretty similar to a lot of the descriptions of Sasquatch that I was seeing at the Bigfoot Museum today.
Yeah. And of course, all the way across the board, that's pretty well much the standard description. Of course, the hair color changes. I say that this one was pitch black. That's because there was no light for the fur to be against. So as it stood up, it was more or less just a black silhouette. So that was the very first. The second encounter happened probably 2012, 2013. Again, behind my house. I'm 30-something years old at this, and my brother has just turned 29. And him and his girlfriend was over here spending a few days with us. They were in town spending some time with us, and he had ran into the house a couple of nights saying, there's something out in the woods going crazy. Well, the property next to ours had sold, and it had been cleared. Clear cut. It was just clear cut into a regular, lot for sale, home lot. He kept saying he was seeing bears, which he was used to, but he kept saying that they were doing weird stuff. He said the bears are acting weird. Now, I have behind my house a burn pit, for burning old wood and, stuff like that. Again, probably 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. I'm in the bed. He actually comes in and wakes me up. He said, this thing is behind the house tearing something up. He said it was growling. You could actually hear wood breaking. So I thought the bear had got into it with either a coyote or something like that. So I grabbed my 45 and we go out back to investigate. Now again, there's no light. There's nothing for me to gauge anything by. I just kind of know the area good enough to where I can walk it at dark. So we're probably a half a football field away from my house. All of a sudden, same black silhouette. My brother is standing beside me, and he said, oh my, and before he could get God out, I pumped 2 shots into this thing's chest. Now, the bullets that I used weren't hollow points. I used slugs. So, at point blank range, whatever I shot with a 45 should have went straight through and tore out.
Yeah.
No blood, no hair, no nothing. All I found the next morning was the spent casings.
Really?
This thing was, when it stood up, it was as wide by itself as him and I standing side by side, and my shoulders are 52 inches wide. That's not counting my brother's shoulders. And all he could say was, oh my God. Now, until this day, though, funny story, till this day, my brother still thinks that was a bear. I didn't have the heart to tell him, but no blood splatter, no nothing. It's like I didn't even shoot it. And I know, I saw the fur light up. It was kind of a light, it was almost kind of like white, but it was grayish. and it would have been somewhere in the upper torso. The way I shot would have been somewhere in the upper torso, and I could see the fur. He saw the fur when we shot. When I shot, the flashes lit it up twice. So whatever I shot was definitely standing in front of us, but there was never no sign of being shot. So those are the two things that have happened to me that, of course there was just other small stuff that happened, things being moved, and getting the feeling you're outside working. You kind of get the feeling that you're being watched, that something's looking at you. I mean, that's just kind of stuff that I got used to over a lifetime of living in this, spot where I live.
Mm-hmm.
And where I live is surrounded by the woods, pine thickets, trees everywhere. We're in the woods, so. But those are the two things that actually happened to me specifically.
Those are amazing encounters. I really enjoyed hearing those.
Well, I appreciate that. I haven't really told a whole lot of people about it. And like I said, I've always kind of shrunk back from saying, yeah, it was Sasquatch. And what I will say is that I can categorically tell you that it was not a bear either time.
Okay.
Because bears do not stand up like humans. Bears do not have shoulder positioning like a human. And both times I saw the outline of the creature both times, and both times you would have sworn that it was an 8-foot tall human being standing in front of you, just covered in fur.
That's awesome.
So that's all I can really say categorically, is that it was not a bear. I know for a fact it was not a bear.
I'm glad to know that you have that distinction in your mind.
When I've thought about it over the years since all that happened, and after the first time that it happened to me, I kind of had to come to grips with the ideal that it had happened. And once you come to the grips with the ideal of what you saw, it kind of, everything else, all the other little small stuff around you starts making sense. Why this happened, why that happened, why was this moved, why was that moved? What's that smell? all that, all that stuff kind of starts making sense. So.
When I was in the Bigfoot Museum, a lot of the reported sightings had mentioned a smell that had gone along with the Sasquatches.
Yeah, I think it's so bad on some of them, like even in Florida, it's called the skunk ape, because it smells so bad. But I know there's different reporting, different. And I've been studying cryptids now ever since that happened to me. I've, anything to do with any kind of cryptid in North America, I've been excited about, because, you can always sit back and say, well, I wonder if that's real. Well, once you see it for yourself, and you're not looking at something that has already been identified, and then you start listening to other people's stories and other people's accounts, once you accept the fact that this is what it is, it really becomes exciting then, because it's not, you're not looking at it from the standpoint of a skeptic going, I wonder if they're making this up, because what they're telling, the story that they're telling, you're checking off all the boxes as, yeah, okay, well, this sounds exactly like what happened to me, so.
Yeah, that's really interesting. The Sasquatch Museum is also an active research center. Have you ever considered reaching out to them and telling them about your experiences?
I have talked to someone there once or twice. Really, it's scheduling conflicts for me. But I am planning on talking to somebody down there, because all this is going to segue into a series that I'm going to be doing on my YouTube channel for the month of October. It's going to be I'm going to be exploring the cryptids of North America.
Oh, that's great.
The first.
Do you have any particular ones you're going to cover?
The first one I'm going to be covering is Mothman. The second one I'm going to be covering is the Beast of Bray Road. I'm going to be covering the Jersey Devil. On the fourth one, I'm going to be covering Sasquatch, and then on the fifth one, Halloween night, I'm going to be covering Chupacabra.
All right, Mothman is my absolute favorite cryptid.
My kid's favorite too.
I've actually had a tattoo of him for about a year now, and I got a tattoo of a Bigfoot just this last week.
Right. Well, that is so cool.
I'm a big fan of cryptids. I really want to go to Point Pleasant and visit the Mothman Museum and see the Mothman Festival that goes on there.
Oh yeah, they make a big deal out of Mothman up there in Mount Pleasant.
I would love to go myself one day. What I can tell you about cryptids from my experience with this class is that cryptids fall under the category of a non-empirical being, which is the scientific term used to describe these beings that have been sighted or spotted that have not been, like, nailed down genus, species, and whatnot.
Right.
A lot of these creatures have significant cultural context within the regions that their stories come from.
Right.
And this class is an anthropology course studying the significance of these creatures to these different cultures. So it covers ones like the Loch Ness Monster, Kappas in Asia, the Jersey Devil, like you mentioned, Bigfoots, of course. Covers stuff like Yetis in Alaska, but talking about the significance of these creatures to the cultures that they arose in, and what possible explanations, what roles these creatures fulfilled in those cultures. Right. And a common thread I've noticed in a lot of them is these creatures serve as warning to tell kids, like you were saying, passed down word of mouth from parent to child, saying, oh, don't go out at night, the Bigfoot will get you.
Yeah.
Or don't jump in the lake, the Loch Ness Monster will eat you.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting hearing the cultural context behind these animals outside of, like, just spottings and sightings. It's interesting, like you said, the word of mouth, how these stories get spread.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's kind of, my dad was coming from a place of, I'm almost 100% certain he had seen something at some point in his life. Because he was, my dad wasn't scared of many things as he walked through this world. But my dad, grown man, 50-something-year-old, was scared of the dark. So there had to be something, because I'm 47 years old now, and I go out at night all the time. Dark doesn't bother me whatsoever. Once you accept the fact that there's things in the dark, there are things that go bump in the night. And that's kind of one of the things that in my studies that I've been doing, getting ready for this series that I'm going to be doing on my YouTube channel. Can these stories all just be made up? Can it all just be people's imagination?
Yeah, that's part of what the class is looking into, talking about how so many people have such similar stories, how there's got to be something behind it.
Yeah, I mean, we had a show when I was growing up. I don't know if you've ever gotten to see it or not, called Unsolved Mysteries. And Unsolved Mysteries dealt with paranormal stuff, missing persons, unidentified flying objects, and the very first cryptid that I ever actually saw myself was on Unsolved Mysteries. They were covering the Loch Ness Monster. Mm-hmm. And the show was hosted by a gentleman named Robert Stack, and that was the question that he asked sort of toward the end of the clip was, is everybody hallucinating this? Can everybody be hallucinating, seeing the exact same thing? And that's kind of where I fall back to when it comes to cryptids in North America, especially Bigfoot. Sasquatch is one of those creatures that has been seen. I mean, if you sat down and you look at a map of the U.S., there literally have been Sasquatch sightings in every state, every region. And every region has their own unique story about what this creature is and what this creature means. Like I said, in Florida it's skunk ape. In Kentucky it's the wild man. Of course, out in Northern California and in Oregon, is Sasquatch. Here in the South, it's, you know, Sasquatch, Bigfoot. It just, everybody can't be hallucinating the same thing. There's way too many. There's way too many stories. There's way too much evidence pointing to everybody can't be hallucinating. And and like I said, once you set your mind to once you set your mind to start thinking out of the possibility of could it be to it has to be, then it really starts opening up your eyes as to what's really going on. No, everybody can't be hallucinating. That's like people who study ufology, which is another subject that I follow, and I've got my own stories there too. But uh, you know, are these people looking up at night seeing just satellites, or are they seeing stars, or are they seeing swamp gas? Well, the video footage that I've studied over the years, there's something there. People are seeing something. Now is it little gray men? I don't know. I really don't know. Is it? But there's something there, because I mean, some of these people, it's just like with people who have had encounters with Sasquatch, Mothman, all these stuff. These people have taken lie detector tests and passed them. And the guy doing the lie, yeah, and the guy running the lie detector says, hey, they're telling the truth. They saw something. So you can't trick everybody all the time. That's kind of the point I'm trying to make. So it can't just be everybody hallucinating. And I've been pointing out in my videos here, especially over the last 5 years, the birds have just been acting really weird. I've been hit in the face by a red-tailed hawk riding my motorcycle. I mean, usually those kind of, those things don't ever happen. Yeah, this one was sitting in the middle of the road, and it took off and it flew out away from me, and then it turned all of a sudden and it came back and hit. I was on Fort Mountain. It came back and hit me in the face and broke my nose. So I mean, the birds are acting weird, and I'm.
Something we don't.
Yeah, and that was kind of what I was getting at, is that the animals know something. The animals know, you can see it on YouTube. You can go just type in birds acting weird. You'll see turkeys walking in circles, or you'll see, one video of just like thousands of birds dropping out of the sky dead all at the same time. So, there's something happening. I mean, I think it's on a bigger scale than just people having, seeing things. I think it's happening on a bigger scale than that. But I don't know. You got to be careful, because you get out of the plane of what is, and then you start getting into conspiracy theory, and that's where I try to stay away from.
Yeah, you can slip into that real quick.
Yeah, you can slip into conspiracy real quick.
I know a few people who definitely have fallen a little too close into that.
Yeah.
But it could be explained, the birds, because they're more in tune with what goes on in nature. Maybe they're more sensitive to it than we are.
Yeah, absolutely. But I'll tell you what, Grace, that's really the ones that I've got. That's all I've really got, the things that have happened to me personally anyway. But I appreciate you taking time for this interview. Now, did you record the audio of this?
Yes, sir, I did.
Perfect. Okay. All right. Well, if there's anything you need to clear up or anything I don't make sense on, you've got my phone number. You can feel free to call me back anytime you need to.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
All right. Before I let Gracie go, guys, I'm going to go ahead and sign off here. Thank you guys for hanging out with me and Gracie as I did this interview for talking about cryptids. And keep your eyes open for Rolling with T-Bone Presents Cryptids of North America, coming in October. But guys, until next time, y'all take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and hey, thanks for watching. Alright guys, I'm going to try to make this little clip here, putting on the end of this video, as quick as I possibly can. I told y'all I would read her thesis at the end of the interview, so here goes. T-Bone is the riding buddy of my dad. He lives in the Blue Ridge area of Georgia at the base of the Appalachian Mountain Range of the United States. This is an area where the Bigfoot or Sasquatch is a widely reported cryptid. I interviewed T-Bone over the phone about his personal experience with such creatures. I find this particular cryptid to be very interesting as it is prominent all over the United States, but there is a special affinity for Bigfoot here in Georgia. There is even a museum and a research center in Blue Ridge called Expedition Bigfoot that I have been to twice. Because of everything that I have heard and seen about this mysterious cryptid, I was excited to speak with T-Bone about his experiences. T-Bone and I spoke together about the nature of these creatures and his beliefs on the topic. He commented about how so many people have reported the same things, sights, smells, and experience with these creatures. If so many people can have the exact same recollections, there has to be something to it, right? Common experiences with these creatures include a stench, height varies from around 7 to 12 feet on average, always covered in hair or fur, and abnormally large feet. These creatures have a long history of being spotted even amongst the native peoples. I learned at the museum that the native people in the Americas would even make costumes of the creatures. If so many people throughout history all claim the same things, we should listen. In our interview, T-Bone was kind enough to explain to me his personal encounters. He mentioned the first time he had ever encountered the mysterious creature as follows. In 1988, T-Bone was a young lad and he was at his parents' house one night. They had some dogs and the dog was chained to a lead in the yard. The dog had somehow gotten unchained. His dad told him to go chain the dog back, so he went outside to do so. As he was reaching and going to chain the dog, he suddenly saw this large creature not too far away from him, only 3 or 4 feet away. It was large, maybe 8 feet tall, had shoulders like a man. I'm sorry about all this traffic, guys. Had shoulders like a man, stood on 2 feet, and made no noise. T-Bone then proceeded to drop the dog lead and ran for it back to the house. He told his dad what happened, and his dad did not make him go back outside that night, and from then on, he was hesitant to send him outside at night. The second encounter that T-Bone described was a bit more recent. T-Bone was about 40 when this encounter happened. He was in his house, and his younger brother was staying over. His brother came inside, woke T-Bone up around 10 or 11 p.m. and said he saw something in the yard. T-Bone grabbed his gun and followed him outside. There were no lights, but T-Bone saw the creature. It was tall. Once again, it had shoulders like a man, and it was covered in fur. T-Bone landed 2 shots straight to where its torso was. The flash of the gun slightly illuminated the area so that he could see the fur the thing was covered in. Once again, he saw the same type of beast that was definitely not anything he had encountered in the day. Both of these experiences that T-Bone so kindly shared with me indicate the same type of Sasquatch-like creature both times. He was sure that it was not something like a bear or a man. I think it is really interesting that we can be so sure of something that we cannot prove. I think it is amazing that these creatures can exist in our collective consciousness, but not in scientific records. I think it keeps alive the magic and whimsy of the natural world. Are Bigfoots real? I hope so, but who is to say? I want to thank again the young lady. I'm not going to keep calling her name out because I call it out several times during the interview. But that's very cool, guys. And like I said, this video is going to segue into the beginning of the Rolling with T-Bone series that's coming in October. So y'all guys keep your eyes open for that. And if you have any cryptid experiences, let me know about it. All right, guys. Till next time, y'all take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. And hey, thanks for watching.